Jumping into family research can be a difficult task, especially coming from a mixed family like myself. And when it comes to my family, I have some ancestors who were able to pass for white. And turns out one of my ancestors, who was supposed to be a Italian immigrant, might not have been Italian at all. Rumors have it that this person was actually a Lenape Indian, and when it comes to that, like, I really don't blame certain people for passing for white back then because times were different. And I'm going to speak a little bit about that in this video. Getting right into it, my mother is someone who can pass for white. And my whole life, I never really thought about my mother passing for white. To me, it was like she was just someone who was just mixed because that's what she is. She's mixed. And all the gatherings that I went to, like the family reunions and so on and so forth, I never came across a full on white uncle or like a white aunt. Everyone is like my complexion or like browner. And my mother is the lightest one in the family. But I've been told by other people that she looks like she can be like white or Spanish or whatever. And I do got Spanish in my family, but it doesn't make up the whole genetics of my ancestry tree. But I never really thought about my mom passing for white. Now, she has like a milky complexion and brunette hair, but it's like really curly. And yeah, the only white ancestor, the last one in the family, because I do have white in my DNA, was my mother's grandmother. So like my great great grandmother, she was white. Now this Italian immigrant on my mother's father's side, I believe is my grandfather's grandfather. He is supposedly the Italian immigrant that may not be Italian at all. So in my family, there's a rumor of this Italian person that was actually Lenape Indian. He was just able to pass for white, so therefore he done switched like the records and changed his last name. And I find that interesting because I did find a record of a ancestor coming from Italy, but it might be something totally different. I don't know. But according to ancestry.com, and I'm going to use ancestry.com because everybody uses that. When it comes to the DNA test, they're always changing it up. And at one point, I had Italian. The next, I didn't. Then I had Greek. I had Turkish. And now they just updated the whole thing. And now, according to ancestry.com, I'm like 6% like Italian and East Mediterranean, like down to Israel. And I do take DNA testing with a grain of salt because it always switches up. Um, but I find it interesting how it shows up on mine. But then again, there are some people in my family who don't even get Italian at all. And we all have the same grandparents, great grandparents. And there's no mama's baby, daddy's maybe, whatever, how that saying goes. There's none of that in my family. Like everyone comes from like the same grandparents. So I don't know. But the people in my family that said that this Italian immigrant is actually in Lenape, these people in my family are older than me. So they've been around to see these ancestors that I never met. So it's like I'm the youngin coming into the game, learning everything. So it's like, should I trust the DNA sites or should I just trust what my family is saying? So I don't know. It's pretty it's pretty interesting. So it sounds like to me it could either go two ways. Either this ancestor wanted to pass for white so he can live a better life, um, or this person really was Italian and my family probably don't like the fact that someone had dated outside their race. And it is what it is. So, but if it is the case that my ancestor had decided to just pass for Italian, I can understand why, because the times back then was really rough And if you was somebody that was mixed, both sides didn't really like you. So, for instance, my biracial great grandfather on my mother's side, he was indigenous and white, but for the sake of the video, I'm gonna say black and white. And the blacks didn't like him because he was half white, and the whites didn't like him because he was half black. So you had that going on. And people who pass for white, now I'm not somebody who passes for white, I obviously look mixed, but I do notice people who pass for white, they don't get that much love from the black community. So I don't blame them for stepping outside of the group just to like get by. And if you can get by just being white and whatnot, I mean, it is what it is. And the reason why I know that people who pass for white don't get that much love from the black community is because of my mother. So I've noticed that she, some black women just don't like her. They just don't like her because of the way she looks. I've noticed that growing up, and I noticed that with some of her friends. So, okay, I just got a couple of stories, but I don't want to make this too long. So, a few months ago, I was at an event because I'm studying my family history, trying to figure it all out. And one of my mom's old friends in the community, she's a black woman. And I was talking to her about some things, and she was telling me about my family. And she said that my family were colorists. And I was just like, okay, I never grew up around colorist family members. I was never taught to hate people based off of their skin complexion. So, like, what are you talking about? So I asked her, how was my family colorist? And she was like, oh, because they're light skinned. And I'm like, there has to be a better reason. And she was like, no, it was just because they're light skinned, so they were colorist. And when I saw my mom later on that day, I was just like, what kind of friends did you used to hang around? Because this lady accuses the family of being colorist because we're all light skinned. So there's that. And I remember this other old friend of my mother. We was somewhere. We was at some restaurant, and she came across her old friend, and I guess her friend, the last time she saw me, I was like a little baby or whatever, and I'm all grown up. And she was just saying some things like everything good about me, like as far as me having an ass, because I'm kind of thick. Even though I'm sitting down, like I got an ass. But I remember she was just pointing all the good parts about me, and that was the parts that were just so happened to be black. And all the other parts about me that wasn't like considered good in her eyes, that had to be from like the other parts of my family. So I would see little things like that, and I would just look at my mom like, who were these friends that you were hanging around? Because they all sound very judgmental based off of how we look. So going into that, I could definitely see why certain people will want to pass for white just to like not be around that. Another reason why I can see my ancestors saying that they were Italian is because a lot of Italians moved out here in New York and just took over. So I'm from Staten Island, and this place is full of the mob. Whatchamacallit, Paul Castellano's mansion, I believe, is up on sale right now for like 16.8 million. And if you don't know who Paul Castellano is and the Gambinos and all that stuff, then I don't know what to say. But they just came out here and just took over everything. And my grandfather was really, really cool with the mob, to the point where they wanted him to join, but he never did. Now, I don't know all the stories because they kept the women and children out of it, but I do remember growing up noticing certain things and seeing certain things. And to this day, because I live around them and I walk around the neighborhoods and stuff like that, and whatchamacallit, every year for like Halloween, my family always trick-or-treats in their area because they're super, super generous. This guy, uh who lives in Toad Hill, which is known to be a very, very wealthy neighborhood. And that's where Paul Castellano's mansion is. Um, it was this past Halloween, and this guy, they was giving away so much stuff, and this guy had like gold and all this whatever else he has. I don't know. He just had gold and certain coins in his car, and he had a bunch of it, and he really didn't need that much anymore because he already has enough. And he just gave it to my dad, like, just like, here you go. He just needed someone to talk to because even though they're very wealthy, they're also very lonely oftentimes. Not to get off subject, but what I'm trying to say is they came out here, took over, and a lot of them live in these wealthy mansions and whatnot. So it would just make sense if you are somebody that's trying to pass for white to say, hey, I'm Italian, because they were like the winning team back then, and still kinda to this day. I will say this, even though some people decided to pass for white just so they can live a better life and get by, to me, it's like, I don't like how they had to do that. And I don't like how this group, as far as the Black community goes, we don't really know how to stick together based off of just colorism alone. And for the Italians to come out here and take over this whole island that I live on, which is Lenape territory, and for a Lenape ancestor to jump ship and just be like, hey, I'm Italian, it's just like, it sucks because you see other groups coming here just off the bat, just working their way up the ladder, and to see the Black community still finding its way. I mean, some of us have, and some of us is still struggling. It's, I don't know, it's a weird observation, and I don't like it, but it's something to definitely learn from. And speaking of passing for white, now that I think about it, when it comes to this Black and mixed community, I don't really hear stories of people passing for white speaking on their experiences. Yeah, the most quietest of ones in this space. So if there's anybody in this YouTube world who is someone who passes for white, but you're majority Black, I would like to hear your stories, because I find people like my mother, because she's not, even though she looks a certain way, she's mainly of like indigenous mixed descent. Um, I have more of census records of people being listed as Negro and mulattoes than the ones that were white. So yeah, I just find yeah stories really unique. So if there's anybody on this YouTube space that is white passing, someone who passes for white, I would like to hear your stories because it needs to be told. And yeah,